Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and during our shows, as you know from watching for the last 18 years, I talk to writers and sometimes other brands of artists about what inspires them to write, what they've done in the past, what they're working on, what they might have planned for the future. We cast a pretty wide net. We've had actors on, we've had painters on, we've had sculptors on. So if you have an idea for a writer or another artist who might appear on the show, please watch for our address at the end of the show. I'd also like to point out that most past episodes are available at Sawyer Library here in Gloucester on VHS tape. So if you still have a VHS machine, you can go in, take out a past episode, watch it at home, and then bring it back just as you would a book. Tonight we have a special guest by the name of Sally Lee, who is both a painter and a writer. So it's a good fortuitous combination for our show tonight. Sally is originally from Beverly Farms, the part of Beverly that's closest to Gloucester, and therefore the best part of Beverly. She went to Governor Dummer School and then later up to Maine to Colby College. She always wanted to be in art, not primarily as a writer, so she studied at the Art Institute in Boston and then later at the New York Studio of Painting, to further her talent as an artist. She now lives in Danvers and writes and paints children's books, and we're going to talk about those children's books during the next half hour. Sally, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to ask you a question. I think I hinted at this before the show. Why did you want to be an artist?
It was funny. I just naturally created things. It never seemed to be, a forced thought. I was even as a young kid. No one ever pushed me. If there were art materials in my path, I would create things. So it was a very natural expression of mine. I mean, as long back as I can remember, even as a little kid. So.
Did your mother paint? Your father paint?
My mother painted a little bit, and my father did a little drawing, but he was more of a musician, and my mother was more of a poet. And I think that they probably just gave us everything available and then saw what we would dive into, and that was one of my favorite things.
So both of your parents perform or were creators
Yes.
of one form of art or another.
Right.
That's interesting, a good
Yep.
combination.
Yep.
Have you ever thought of maybe going into poetry?
I have written poetry. I have. And in fact, I still write poetry today. It's very, they're very simple. I love to write haikus and, I'm always writing. I don't publish it or tell many people about it, but it's definitely another thing that I do.
So the audience heard it here first.
Right.
So
My haiku book will come out next week, right? Yeah.
Okay, we'll look forward to that. So you practiced both the arts that your parents gave you, but you decided that the art felt dominant.
It was dominant, and it was very natural. It was a way that I felt. It was like a natural way for me to express myself, and I also got a lot of positive feedback. Not that that was the incentive for me, but it seemed to get a reaction out of people. If I wrote something or if I sang something, I didn't really get that much back then. But when I drew something, people would just respond and in a way that they wouldn't respond to anything else that I had done. And so that was a sign to me. Plus, I loved doing it. I liked the challenge of it. I had to work really hard at it. In some ways, it was natural, but in other ways, it was something that if I wanted to achieve what I wanted to achieve, I would have to do it a lot, and push myself.
So was your goal, say when you were at Colby or at the Art Institute in Boston, to become a painter and do shows and become a well-known graphic artist?
Well,
not graphic artist, but painter.
Yeah, when I was at Colby, in fact, when I was in high school, the art program wasn't that great back then. It was more of a focus on academics and sports. And so I actually sort of stopped creating anything. And then when I went to Colby, I was very fortunate to have a wonderful drawing teacher who actually was only there for that year that I was there, and she had us study the model. And my life was like that with art. It was sort of like I always put it on the back burner because I felt like I was never going to get anywhere with it. And then somebody would come into my life and they would say, this is who you are and this is what you need to do. And it would sort of push me into the next. And then we had to pick a major, and I was going to pick something like American Studies because that's what a friend of mine was doing, and then my art teachers would say, you should be an art major. And I honestly felt like that wasn't something that was viable for my future. I felt like I had to be much more practical. And so I just sort of forgot about it. But this is why, professors are wonderful because they just, they would just say, you just need to keep doing this. And so I did. And they would push me. And then, so I drew. And then my junior year, I went to France, to school in France. I went to an art school there. And that was where I first discovered oil paints. And I just fell in love with oil paints. I'm still in love with oil paints today. It was like the medium created for me, And, I've never looked back. And then, and then you graduate from college, and then you start to think about being practical again. And I think that's why I went and studied graphic design, which I actually was quite competent at. But I didn't feel fulfilled. It was like half business, half art. You're sort of in no man's land.
This is at the Art Institute.
This is at the Art Institute
in New York.
And then so then I after 2 years there, I worked for someone as a graphic designer, and it just didn't suit me at all. And I figured this is my life, and I don't want to do this for the next 35 years. And so I went to the Art Institute in New York. I went to the New York Studio School in New York, and it was strictly painting, 9 to 5, and drawing every day. And I just immersed myself. And I think it was for people who are right on the cusp about whether they want to really do this with their life, or they don't, And I lasted, about 8 months. I actually didn't finish out the year, but I felt like I was at a point in my life where I was ready to just do my own thing. And I felt like I was a mature artist. I didn't want people to tell me what to paint anymore. I sort of knew, I didn't know in black and white what I wanted, but I felt like I knew it was me, and I had painted the figure, and that was the thing for me, I feel like you have to kind of master. If you can master that, you can pretty much sort of master anything. And then...
So you decided you wanted to be in paint, and you wanted to be in oil paint. Now you do children's books now. So somewhere the painter was joined by two other ambitions
right.
to write books and to write children's books. How did those three elements come together?
So I moved back to this area mainly because my family is here, and I also love this area. It's one of the most beautiful areas I've ever been to, and so I wanted to come back here, and I wanted to have shows of my work. I wasn't really quite sure where I wanted to go with it, but I knew that it was something that I couldn't live without. That's probably a good way to put it, and. But I also needed to live, so I needed a job. So
Picky.
So, and I knew I didn't want to do graphic design, so I ended up. I'm an administrative assistant at MIT in Cambridge, which is a perfect combination for me because it pays the bills and it's a nice environment to work in. But at the same token, I can have my own career on the side, and so I tried to do a lot of these. Art shows, and I was having some success, but it didn't take off the way I sort of thought it would, and so I was getting frustrated. And at the same time, I was learning how to use computers and digital illustrations. I was sort of learning that whole technique at the same time, which I actually really enjoyed. And so my mother actually had suggested to me that we write a book together, which I didn't bring the one that she and I did, but we did that about 10 years ago, and I liked the process so much that I started to write them on my own. And go ahead.
So was that first book a children's book?
And it was called Today I Sat, which was a poem that she wrote, and I did the illustrations for.
Good family project.
Yeah, and we had a ball, very simple little book, and but I was kind of hooked.
So you were doing your own shows, and but
Here and there.
here and there,
Right.
but it wasn't
Enough.
as fulfilling as you thought it
Right.
would be. So
Exactly.
your mom came along with this idea, and you
Right.
said, and that becomes
Exactly.
a bingo moment. 10 years ago.
Yeah, I would say it was about 10 years ago. And then I wanted to do more with her, but she was kind of like, no, I want to do other things. I want to play tennis with my friends, you know. So I was kind of at a crossroads, you know. And and I had been given a grant at MIT to do a show of
really?
my paintings. So I knew that I was in the right direction.
So the MIT's been very supportive.
They've
in
been very
different ways.
supportive, and they have grants for students and staff and faculty if you apply for them. And it's actually a pretty active program there.
Now
And,
you've brought some of the. We're going to plug these
Yeah.
some of these books. You've brought some of the books that you've done
Yep.
of your own that are both written and illustrated by you. I'm going to hold one up called Midnight Lucy.
It's Nighty Night Lucy, actually. But
I'm sorry.
that's all right. Nighty Night.
Nighty Night Lucy. I can't read. Nighty Night Lucy, which is this a recent book,
Yep,
Sally?
just published in June.
June of '07.
Yes.
And can you tell us about this book as a lead into the others?
So I started to write these books because I'm deaf in my left ear, and I wanted to talk about disabilities and disabilities in children. And I don't think there are enough books out there for kids with disabilities. And I wanted to write about that. And also, it helped with my experience. It was sort of a purging of my own experience of growing up with a disability. So I picked this character, Lucy, as a bunny with who is deaf in one ear. And I picked an animal because I think kids respond to animals in sort of human characteristics. If you see a lot of the successful children's books, a lot of times they're animals. And so I picked, you know, sort of an innocent little character. And then that was my original book, and then it took off, and I did all these other Lucy books, and this is my final one, which is a Goodnight book, so it's kind of ending of the series.
So your original book with your mother featured
No,
Lucy?
that's actually separate. That was
Okay.
that was completely separate, and then I started on my own track.
And all of
So-
your books have Lucy,
These
the
right.
rabbit.
Not every single one,
Lucy
but
the rabbit.
yeah.
Who
and, her,
has-
and her pal Seymour the cat is her
Seymour the
little
cat and the
sidekick.
rabbit and cat get along. And Lucy is deaf in her,
Left
ear.
like me.
and so she deals with that in the
And
story.
it's about, you know, enjoying life despite the challenges that we have, which, you know, a lot of people have, you know. I think it's sort of about imperfections in people, and not everybody, you know, has the same challenges in life, and you know, that you can overcome them anyway, and not to let people, places, and things, you know, sort of,
So,
you know, stop you from, you know.
so Lucy's a very positive role model.
Well, she has her
and an
days, right? But I
example.
mean, yeah, but generally she's just living life, you know, living life, and
So, and this Nighty Night Lucy is the most recent.
it's the most recent one.
Now, I want to look at some others in a second, but where can our viewers buy your books?
So they're all on Amazon.
All on Amazon?
They're all hardcover and softcover. You can also buy them on Barnes & Noble's website,
Amazon, Barnes & Noble,
and Borders, I believe,
and Borders,
and Target.com
and Target.
also.
So they can look them up under your name, Sally Lee,
Yep.
or the title, for instance, Nighty Night Lucy.
Yes.
And are they available at any bookstores on the?
No, I'm working
North
on
Shore?
that. That's my next challenge, is to try to get them on shelves, but it takes a little while to do that.
Now, I want to talk about a couple other titles. You brought several in it. Seymour's
Masquerade Ball.
Now, is Seymour a different character?
No, he's the cat.
Oh,
He's
this
her
is a
pal.
Seymour's Masquerade Ball.
Yep,
He's the cat who's Lucy's friend.
yep, her pal.
And I want to pick maybe this book because it's might show up a little better than the other one, to show some of the art and the story. This is can you describe that painting and also describe your artwork and also read the text there?
So these are digital illustrations, actually, and so the first page is one day Lucy and Seymour were playing with their favorite yellow ball, and it's a story about they get invited to a masquerade ball, but they don't have much, and so she doesn't have a fancy dress like all the other kids in the neighborhood. And so she and Seymour go up into this old chest and they find, old dresses, and they put everything on, and they're able to go to this ball, and there's people in all these fancy costumes and big fancy shiny cars, and I think it's just about, whatever it is that you can bring to the table is okay. And then there's a contest about who has the best costume, and she and Seymour win for their costumes, and then they have a big fancy cake at the end. And
Does Lucy's deafness in her left ear come up
not
as
in
an
this
item
one.
in the different books?
So in the original book, it's the most poignant part of the story, but in the other ones, I'm not so glaring about it. I don't want it to be a glaring issue, but it's just sort of, I think people are afraid to talk about. Not all people, but I think a lot of people are afraid, and I think it should be something that people are more comfortable. And I think a lot of times kids with disabilities get left out because it's just assumed that they don't want to take part or whatever. And I think it's sort of about, making everybody feel welcome. I mean, you have to sort of show up as well, but I think, sometimes you need a little help,
So it's not a dominant theme in all of the
It's not
storylines.
glaring. It's not glaring. It's sort of.
Does Lucy ever sit intentionally with her left ear to boring people so she doesn't have to?
All the time.
Does she?
Like me.
That's another friend of mine who uses that trick all the time.
Yeah, there are some hidden blessings,
Yes.
know.
What age level are your books appropriate for?
So I say about 4 to 9.
4 to 9.
Yep.
And so they make wonderful gifts, I'm sure,
Yep,
if people
yep.
want to go to Amazon. Can you tell us about some of the other books you've brought along?
Yeah, so a lot of these are about Lucy. This one is completely different. This is Dragina's New Shoes. This is one of my publisher's favorites. This is one of my very first books. And this is about a dragon, and she's not perfect either, and she wants a new pair of shoes. And her mother is too busy, so every day she says, I want to go to the mall to get a pair of shoes, and her mother's like, I'm too busy today. And
Can you read the text on this page?
Okay, once there was a shy monster named Dragina. And so she ends up, her mother gives her little tasks to do every day, and then eventually her mother finally says, okay, we can go. It's kind of a silly little book, but it's sort of about, earning things a little bit and helping. A lot of my books are about helping people. It's sort of like it's sort of like what you give to the world is what you get back from the world, kind of a thing. And not everything is if you do X, Y happens. Sometimes we're not really quite sure. And I have another book, Magdalena Finds the Golden Pair, which is...
Now, excuse me, Dragina and Magdalena do not involve Lucy.
No, not at all. Completely separate. Every once in a while I just go on a completely different tack, non-related to Lucy. Sometimes I get sick of Lucy, she gets all the glory, so...
Do the Dragon book move better, sell better than the Lucy as a bunny? Or can you tell?
I can't tell. In fact, I mean, I'm very compulsive, so I basically have written 17 books in like 4 years. So I have a lot of, things that I wanted to get out. So I'm sort of ahead of myself. And I also, basically went to a self-publishing company because I tried to go to the big publishers and I wasn't really getting anywhere. And I had gone through all the proper channels and I even had connections and I got no response basically. And so I got to a point where it was either they sit on my coffee table as drafts or I self-publish them. So I found this wonderful publishing company, booksurge.com, and I got a representative who's been great, and she's just let me do whatever I want to do. She supports me 100%. And so I'm just cranking them out. So the whole thing is, I'm really, bushwhacking my own path. I don't really know what I'm doing, except that I know what I'm trying to say, and I know how to do the layouts, and I know how to write a little bit, and I know how to illustrate. And so I'm sort of creating my own path. So I'm trying to sell them, but at the same time, I don't want to water down what it is that I'm trying to say. And so
And you don't have to because you're your own boss.
Right.
And
So sales might not be great right now, but that could change tomorrow. And
I know that the children's book industry, which people sometimes assume is easy, is one of the most difficult in publishing, and difficult to get into, and difficult to stay in, and difficult to maintain sales in. And I've heard that from a number of authors. I'm hearing it from you again.
And the thing is, because painting has always been my goal, I'm going into this completely cold. I never grew up saying I want to be a children's book writer, an illustrator. So it's sort of like I bring no prejudices to the table, just my own thoughts and experiences. So I'm not necessarily heartbroken, because even though I'm putting a lot into it, any sale is a good sale. Do you know?
Oh, I do. I do.
So if I get a royalty of $8 in a month, it's great. So if they take and there's a reviewer in out west, Midwest Book Review, and so I've sent my books to him, and he's given me a 5-star review for 4 of my books already. And so he caters to a lot of small publishing people who aren't able to get a big review by the New York Times or somebody like that. So there are places you can go for people like me who, not really quite sure what I'm doing, but I want to stay true to what I want to say, And I also have a website that has all the books that you can download for free. So if you
mention the URL for.
It's leepublishing.net.
leepublishing.net. And you can download your books?
All my books you can download for free, and you can print them, as long as you don't, sell them to your friends or whatever. But you can print it for free. So if you can't afford a book,
that's going to kind of hurt sales if you can get the books free?
Well, it's actually helping, because people can look at the book, and if they want to buy, if they want to go buy a copy for a gift, then they, Otherwise, for people who can't afford it, they can just, or you can even read it online.
They can read it online, but they won't have the bound.
They won't have the bound copy,
text.
And they don't get the cover.
They don't get the cover. The second book, I interrupted you when you were going to talk about the second book. This is a non-Lucy book.
This is a non-Lucy book. This one's called Magdalena Finds the Golden Pear, and I'm very fond of this book. This is about a bear, and she's been told that there is, she's been told by a reliable source, Magdalena the bear is in search of the golden pear. She is told by a reliable source that she must first learn some of the simple lessons about life. And she goes and she asks her friend, do you know what the secrets of the universe are? And her friends say, no, I'm too busy. I'm too busy, gathering nuts for the winter, stuff like that. And everybody's sort of too busy. But she helps her friend gather nuts, and she helps all these other friends, and she has a friend who's a fish, and he lives in a pond that's got cans and litter, and he says, I can't help you because I'm dying in this pond, and she helps him get all the cans. And anyway, she's frustrated because by the end of the day, she still hasn't found the secrets of the universe, and she lays down under this tree, and she looks up, and it's a pear tree, and so she finds that she finds the golden pear. And it's sort of a story about just helping your friends. You don't know what's around the corner for you. Not that to do something for somebody else is a guarantee for something for yourself, but that the general nature of just helping other people sort of returns to you tenfold.
Answers in your backyard.
Right.
Kind of thing. So that's how did you choose the name Magdalena?
I don't know. It's funny. And also, I was like a C- English student. I was like, the English student who could never get a B. So to actually be writing is such a surprise to me. And so I probably bring no prejudice to that either. So these names just come out of the blue. I have no, it's not like a friend that I know or anything. I just pick a name out of a hat. It's like the stories just come to me, and then I just write it. So.
Are you still painting?
I'm still painting, but I'm actually starting to do oil painting illustrations. So I'm actually combining, you know, I've been doing a lot of these as colored pencil and then scanning them in on my computer and then doing computerized. But now I miss oil painting. So now
So you-
I'm doing oil painting
And
illustrations.
then you shoot those?
And then I scan those. And
Okay.
I upload them to this publisher and they print it as is.
And some of the art, I think you said, was you had done on the computer? Or is it
Some of it-
all scanned and then?
It's
and then you-
both. Like I'll do, you know, sometimes I'll do a fairly detailed colored pencil illustration, and then I scan that in, and then sometimes I look at it, it looks fine. Like these are colored pencil, and I didn't touch them at all, you know. And then other ones, I scan them in, and I add digital ink to them, and they have sort of a computerized. I'm sort of trying all different ones to see, you know, what kind of effect I get.
What art software do you use?
Photoshop. Yep, which I also fell in love with too, which is one of the best software programs ever created for artists. You know, you can do anything with it, you know.
I want to go, we're not quite out of time, but we're running a little bit low. I want to get all these other titles in
Okay, all right, yep,
before we leave. This is Lucy's Halloween.
yep.
Lucy, the
She
main
can't
character,
decide-
the rabbit
yes.
again, is
She can't decide what she wants to be for Halloween, so she tries all these different costumes on, which is what I used to do as a kid. You know, I could never make up my mind.
and then
Tinkerella and the Blue Door.
Tinkerella
Tinkerella.
in the Blue Door. Is this a Lucy?
Nope,
No?
that's a mouse. Yep. Sometimes I get off the Lucy track.
Do-
She gets lost. She gets lost. She's bored. She gets lost, and she finds this blue door, and she finds this monster, and they become best friends, and they shoot the breeze and eat peaches, and you know.
Do these different characters ever meet? Does Lucy ever meet Dragina?
no,
Or
no.
do they-
I don't know
they-
what would happen.
Yeah,
Lots of egos all in the same room.
This is Sometimes I Wonder.
And that's, my mother and I also did that book together. It's a poem.
Is this the-
Sometimes I wonder why dogs are called dogs. Sometimes I wonder why frogs are called frogs.
This is not the first book.
No,
that you did
this is
with
a
Mother.
another
This is
one that
second.
we did. Yep.
And what is your mother's name?
Jean.
Jean Lee?
Yep. She passed away in August, so luckily we were able to do a couple.
Lucy wakes up. See if we can get this on camera before we go. I
And
think
that's
I'm
like
getting
that's a
I'm
wake-up
getting the
book.
signal that I've got to begin to close up here. So, and one more. This is
Peony's favorite holiday. That's a
Annie's
Christmas
favorite
book.
holiday.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
begin to close up. I'm getting a signal from
Yes. Okay.
from Andrew Love. I want to thank you very much for being on the Writer's Block, Sally Lee.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for bringing the books down and filling us in about art and children's books.
Thanks for having me, John.
I want to thank everybody in TV land, too, for being with us. If you've learned something about children's literature and art from Sally Lee this evening, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks again for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.